Welcome to the Event Marketing Redefined Unwrapping 2023 show. We wanted to do something special here. Matt hit me up this week and said, why don't we do this in studio, somewhere cool, make this special. I'm going to be hosting today. I'm the guest host, Pablo Gonzalez. You've never heard of me, but I've listened to every single one of these episodes. I'm the biggest fan of the show, and I love events. So I'm just going to try to tee up Matt over here.
Keep this train on track, my friend.
The star today is Matt Kleinrock, CEO of Rockway Exhibits, host of the Event Marketing Redefined show. Matt, got anything you want to say to the
No, just as always, thanks for everybody for spending an hour with us. We're going to give you the most bang for the buck, 60 minutes. And just thank you for people that have been watching the show, following the podcast, download. I can't believe how many downloads on the podcast, questions, emails, responding to the newsletter. Just awesome. Just stoked. Honestly, this is so cool.
Yeah, this is going to be a cool conversation. Matt, as we were talking before this, I think where we want to start is what happened in the event industry in 2023?
Yeah. So I think interesting about the event industry in 23, what I've noticed was like, if I'm comparing it to 22, essentially, right, is I think, the end of 21 rolling into 22, lot of money laying around, a lot of government money, a lot of pent up money, a lot of pent up demand for events and getting out and being in front of people. And it was drinking from the fire hose. I think for corporate event marketers, I think for people like myself, for our supplier partners, I think just everybody, venues, the whole 9 yards, just opening back up. Right. And it was exciting and it was fun. The money was flowing and people were just glad to be there. I think one of the main differences in 23 a little bit is our brakes got pumped a little bit, right? And everybody's like, okay, probably not as much pent up money, not as much government money, kind of things regulating back a little bit to people asking questions. Still a lot of action, a lot of good work, a lot of events, a lot of conferences, a lot of attendees, all good stuff. But I think just a little bit of a pullback to reality from kind of the rush that came out.
Pullback to reality. What does that mean when you say pullback to reality?
I think the pullback to reality was it was no longer people just excited to be at the event, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was more like, okay, what are we doing here? Is this spend worth the money? Are we having success? Costs are so high. Inflation has been hitting and will continue to hit, right? So I think a lot of those questions, it became less of an excitement and more of back to, well, what are we doing here? Are we having results? Is this something worth our while?
It feels like, if I've listened to you correctly throughout this year and throughout the podcast, it feels like there was a big resurgence, like coming up to the pandemic, everybody was high on the hog on events.
Yep.
Pandemic happened, it went away, opened back up, flooded in. And now this year, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's almost like a regression to right before the golden age, right? Like everybody kind of like lost their filter for it, and people are back to asking the same existential questions about events that they were asking before.
Yeah. I mean, old problems, new problems, right? I mean, costs are incredibly high. Inflation doesn't help that, but much of the costs that are still high are the costs that have always been high, and now they're getting even higher, right?
Yeah.
You funnel that into the idea of, are we getting results, right? Going to events, right? Events, trade shows and events ought to be a sales and marketing strategy, not a cost of doing business, right? So when that is the case, you're not spending it just to spend it. So the questions become, are we creating a return? What is the impact this is having? How do we formulate that? How do we understand that? How can we, quantitatively see that and justify essentially this strategic sales and marketing move that we're making?
Yeah, got it. So same old stuff as before / economy happening around it. That isn't only this industry. That's a little bit of the downside. What is the good side? Why are people still doing it?
Man, I think if anything, COVID showed us that like face-to-face is kind of not to be messed with, right? People need face-to-face. They like to be face-to-face. There's meaning in face-to-face. There's true value in that face-to-face, right? So I think events are producing results. Events are giving people fulfillment. There's so much good in that face-to-face. Not to say there doesn't need to be change. I do think that there is significant change that needs to be made. But without a doubt, I mean, the face-to-face is a meaningful medium for companies.
Yeah. Totally. And Bill Landau saying here in the chat, while inflation was an issue earlier in the year, many supplier costs to us end users have come down in the second half of the year. Have you felt that too?
Yes, I mean, they've come down.
Yeah.
I agree with Bill. I just think that when you stack them, I'm talking about old problems into now the same problem. It was already too expensive, right?
Yeah.
Now it's still even more so. So you're waiting for that to come down. When it comes down, it's still going to be too expensive because it was prior. But yes, Bill, it has come down. All different types of rates, materials, supply, all that stuff is coming down, which is a good thing.
Cool. And what we want to paint here on the show is state of affairs and overall macroeconomy, event industry, and then we're going to trickle down into how it affects the event marketer herself, and also just kind of like what Matt's takes are based on all the people that we've spoken about. So let's start there for right now. Overall, Matt, based on the conversations that you have had, there's this dichotomy between cost and uncertainty, but then there's also this very tangible feeling of there's some good stuff happening.
Yeah.
What are the people that you've spoken to? What's the path forward here as far as how to view events?
Yeah. So I'm a big believer, and then from all the really smart people that I've talked to, I mean, I've had so many conversations this year, but essentially, yes, like cost is cost. The same old problems are the same old problems, but yet events work, right? So it comes back to strategy and approach, right? You cannot approach 10 event conferences all the same. They need to be done differently, right? That's understanding your audience. That's crafting a particular strategy and an approach. And by approach, I mean, are you sponsoring? Are you not sponsoring? What size exhibit do you have? What do the activations look like? What are you doing offsite? There's so many pieces that go into the approach. So I think no matter the cost, no matter, yes, the events work, you still have to optimize at these events. You have to go get results. And a big piece of that is you cannot just execute. You must strategize and create an approach that you believe is fitting and one that will work and that you can tinker with down the line.
You know, I might be getting this wrong or not, but like that is a macro business thing. What I'm hearing is personalization, right? Like essentially like there's this expectation that business used to be done all one way and businesses all look this one way and they all did everything these different ways. And now whether it's across social media, whether it's across regular kind of marketing or event marketing, there's this expectation by the consumer that it's got to be what's in it for me specifically, not just like an awareness play.
I mean, just you always have to be considering your audience. I mean, that's marketing 101, sales 101. Who are you speaking to, right? So I think in an event, whether you're running a host event, whether you're running, you know, a buyer conference, I mean, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is you're doing, you're going to a trade show, you're exhibiting, you're sponsoring. Who is that audience? Why are they there? What are they seeking? You know what I mean? You want to meet people at the right place, in the right way, at the right time. You don't want to meet them in a way that they don't want to be met. There are some conferences your clients don't want to be sold. They don't want to be hawked. They don't want to be pressured. They're either there to learn, they're there to see new things. I think people need to get a better understanding of who their audience is, right? There's all kind of cool stuff going on with like personality profiling for events, right? So is your predominant audience, you know, are they introverts? Are they extroverts? You know, do they have certain personality characteristics where they like to talk things out? They like to write things out. They like to do it, learn in big sessions, small sessions. You know, there's a ton of information out there to learn more and more about your customers so you can deliver an event, the experiences, everything should be based off of that customer, where they are, why they are there, and you have to meet them in a way that makes sense to them.
Yeah. Sounds like a very, very universal marketing issue, you know, context change.
I think it's, well, yes. I mean, look, I think it's more complicated than me just saying it. There's so much work, I think, that goes into it. You have to ask a lot of questions. You have to do surveys before surveys, after surveys. You need qualitative information at your own event. Are you talking to people? How do you like this event? How was your check-in? Hey, at this trade show, did you like this session? Did you not like the session? Is there too many speakers? Hey, why are you here? What are you really interested? Are you with your team? Are you not? Like, I mean, you just keep formulating that information to get a grip on who these people are, what it is they're there that they're seeking, and then how you find a way to kind of meet them.
Yeah, it makes sense. If you look back over the year, any kind of conversations around this topic specifically of how to formulate specific strategies, conversations that you have that we can tell people, go back, check out this episode, anything like that? I remember you talking about like Aaron McElroy was somebody that
So,
did this
okay.
type of stuff real well.
Yeah, so multiple conversations. One would be with Erin McElroy
Mhm.
from IBM, right? And she talks a ton. This is more specific from a marketing standpoint. If you're an exhibitor or you're running a host event, right? Like she talks a lot about story, narrative, messaging, and sort of also John Wolf talked about this from Lenovo. I had John on just to show him and I. And then we had him on a panelist show.
Mhm.
And John basically talks about like, what is the message your audience needs to hear?
Mm.
So you have to find a way to convey these things when you get them in person. And it's not just branding up on a wall that says something. There's more to that. It's in the engagements. It's in the offsite activities that you do, the dinners that you run, the things that you sponsor. Everything should formulate around what is the message we want them to hear? What's the hill that we want to die on? You know, I think John's a great example at Lenovo, and I love the example he gave. Everybody knows Lenovo for equipment, right? Everybody.
Yeah.
They want to be known as well for being a solutions provider. So much of the work that he is doing is trying to say, hey, you know us for equipment, but you don't know us for solutions providing. Here's what you need to know. So that goes into that messaging, that narrative, story, themes, concepts. You have to build those around the message you want to deliver, value proposition, problem you solve, whatever it may be.
Cool. I want to dial into something else right now, but before we go there, I didn't prep you for this, but when we were,
Awesome.
as you know, we're preparing to speak at Exhibitor Live.
Yes,
right?
we are.
And in our preparation for the presentation that we're going to make, you said something that I can't get away from that I actually said to a client last week.
Yeah.
And it's this idea that your booth design, and I wonder if this expands to events, but the design of the experience needs to have a goal of getting the attendee to ask a question.
Yeah.
And the answer to that question is your point of view of your company. Can you expand on that a little? Because I thought that was the smartest thing you've told me in a while.
Okay, so I think it's a difficult thing to do, but you're kind of reverse engineering, right? Like if you had somebody that would be an ideal customer of yours and they were coming up to a trade show, an experience, brand activation, a space, whatever you want to call it, in theory, if you could get someone to say, hey, why is your booth themed like this? What is that piece? Maybe it's an element that's hanging. Maybe it's a game. Maybe it's something that intrigues, that barters a question, that brings them to ask a question that you can then go into, well, we did this because of this, and that this is the problem that you solve, the value proposition, the hill that you're willing to die on. Right?
Yeah.
The one is a company that you want that person to leave saying that's what they are all about, right? Like that's what that company is all about. And you want to be known for that specific thing. That to me is marketing.
Yeah.
That's real marketing. So you can have your messaging, and messaging's great, and branding on your walls and all that cool stuff, but it should bleed from the idea of a concept of a design all the way to your messaging, to the theme, the colors, the engagements inside, the pamphlets, QR codes, the dinner you're going to do, all of it.
Yeah.
Can you have one message resonate through? For me, like, I just think that that's kind of utopia a little bit for an exhibitor.
Yeah. And the genius that I find in that, right, is marketing over the last, I'm not a historian of marketing, but it's very clear to me that marketing and your company has gone from like being the hero of the story to making your client the hero of the story, and yours to serve as a guide.
Yeah.
So if you can implement this approach of, hey, the point here is not for me to tell you what's up. It's for you to ask a question that allows me to like point you a certain direction, that allows you to understand it yourself, then you're really accomplishing it. And what you're saying is that's the goal of each event. And at each event, based on the person that's going to be there, you want to tailor that experience, tailor the design a little bit to like tweak it to get that person to ask that question so that you have the right answer.
I think there's two pieces with your customer. One is empathy, right? In marketing, can you empathize with their struggle, their situation, the problems that they're trying to solve, right? If you can't do that, I mean, odds are they probably don't like you. You know what I mean? You know, people work with who they want to, you know, like you have to empathize where you say like, hey, I understand that this is what you're struggling with. And they're like, yes, I am. You know?
Yeah.
And then the other piece is what you're saying about being a guide. They are the hero, not you. And this is the whole Donald Miller story brand concept in marketing is, can you be their guide? How do you shepherd them from problem to this is the result that you're looking for? Here's essentially how I help you get there so you can solve this problem for yourself. So yes, I think that should be somewhere in line in messaging, theme, and all those things, so you can connect the dots for your customer.
I love it, man. I love it. All right. And I want to transition into, so as far as events go, I think throughout the year, we've talked a lot about measurement and
Yeah.
how do you get it? You have an interesting take on this idea that pipeline impact is the thing that you think is the goal. Can you tell me what you mean by that?
All right. So this is such a big topic, and it's this idea. Everyone says ROI, ROE, right? Return on investment, return on experience. And I hear the conversation. Everybody wants it. Everybody wants quantitative data to be able to say, yes, this is worthwhile, or no, this is not. I think events are far more, trade shows, conferences are far more elastic than just, yes, we got ROI. We spent $180,000. We made $1 million. That is something that you should know, but I think they're far more elastic. And I'll go into what I think. So I think if you're running a full event marketing program, gotta remember, everyone's program is different. Everyone's industry is different. The sales cycles are different. The customers are different. There's so many variables that go into it. So you have to take what I'm saying, and then you have to be able to apply it to yourself in some form or fashion, right? But I think when you think about trade shows, when you think about events, this is essentially the impact that is going to be made is net new deals. Of course, everybody wants brand new deals. They want someone to walk up on a show floor or come to an event that doesn't know them and say, and write business for them, right? Come in, enter the pipeline, get a contract.
In 30 days.
Yep. In 3 days.
Yes.
Deal acceleration, right? Do you have deals in your current pipeline that there's a touch point at an event, and that touch point is part of the reason that it accelerates a good experience, a good conversation, clarifying something for them. 2 is deal tagging, right? I think people should be able to tag all deals that have a touch point at any event. And what I mean by that is it doesn't mean it needs to be the lead source. The lead source is meant to be where it originally came from, which I can go on about the idea that is super complicated to do, especially the bigger company that you get. It is super complicated to understand the original place that a deal came from. Sometimes easy, sometimes not. But what I mean by deal tagging is if you have a touch point at an event with a customer, you should be able to tag it as an event, meaning we've had a conversation. They attended a dinner. They showed up at our booth. They did an offsite, go-kart racing with us, whatever. Because I think over time, you'll be able to find a trend in there because of all the deals that got touched, right? Customer resurgence. I mean, how many times are you at an event where you meet with a current customer, they're spending 10 grand, 3 grand, 40 grand, whatever the number is. But then you have a meeting, you settle things, you have a discussion. Maybe it's a rekindled relationship, new person in the seat, but then they start spending more. Well, that event was something that rekindled that. It wasn't a cold email to them, right? It was being at the event, inviting them to dinner, those nuances of the event, the face-to-face, that feeling you get with an individual. So that needs to be a piece of it. I put here like stage 1 unlock, which I think for me is like, there's so many big companies that get people stuck in that stage 1. They downloaded a form. They did something super, super basic. So they're kind of in this weird funnel where they're getting emails, cold calls, different things. But what if they show up at an event? How many of those deals can you unlock that get stalled out in that first beginning phase? And then the last 2 are like big partnerships and kind of the distributor model method, right? Is I don't care what anybody says. I am all for digital marketing and all the other methods in which dollars can go into marketing outside of conferences and events. But at the end of the day, when you are talking big partnerships and big impactful ones and very large deals, they happen in person. They happen face to face. They happen having dinner. They happen over breakfast, having drinks together, spending 2 days, sitting in a room, hashing things out, deciding that this could be a good fit. So that's what I mean by pipeline impact. Net new deals, deal accelerating, tagging deals, customer resurgence, big partnerships. This is what events do. The brand awareness piece is a whole nother section I won't even get into, but this is what's happening at events. And how do you measure that to the best of your ability with what you do and the deals you have, I think is something that people all need to get a grip on as fast as they can.
I love it, man. I think this is future episode thought leadership piece for you in general. And when you were kind of talking to me about this, I took some notes, right? So I'll recap. It is the new relationship is always a reason why people went to events. That is the whole like awareness, right?
They
like,
say net new, yeah, but yeah, I understand. Yeah,
I remember in the panel episode, people started talking about like you got to redefine what awareness means, right?
Bar
Like,
said that.
yeah,
It's 100%. What really is brand awareness? What does it mean? And I think what he's referring to is something him and I have even talked about, which is back in 2000, you had to go to the annual conference. You had to go. The internet wasn't as mature. Think about the maturity of the internet. LinkedIn, Zoom info, the technology. You can get a hold of anybody, anywhere, anytime. You couldn't do it back then, right? You couldn't target them on Facebook. You couldn't target them. You know, anyway, back then you had to go to the annual conference. You don't need to anymore. You don't. You technically could make a case that you don't have to. And I think that's the point he's making. It's not enough just to say, hey, brand awareness. It's just not enough anymore.
Yeah, got it. So I guess I took us down the wrong rabbit hole there. But,
sorry, I went.
But net new is one, right? Can we find new deals? Can we find new clients? It's something that people have always been going to events for. On top of that, there's been a giant shift in the customer. There was like a paradigm of like you need to have 6 touch points with a client with a prospect before they become a client. That's increased exponentially. It's gone from 6 to 20 something.
Yes.
And you're saying that there needs to be a tagging for touch points at events.
Yes.
So that you can start counting those touch points, right? It might be a marketing thing. It might be a Facebook ad, but at an event,
I think
you can touch them a couple of times.
Events are the escalator, my friend.
And
they accelerate faster than that email, that call.
Correct.
Yeah.
So maybe like when we're looking at this deal tagging, maybe when we're looking at touch points, not all touch points are created equal. Maybe I drive past a billboard one day, that counts for X. But if I see you at an event and I spend this much time with you, that should be factored a different way. So like tagging kind of like those touch points, then deal acceleration. So people that knew you, that were in the pipeline, that had awareness, but now they move on to the next phase of their buying journey. I think that
maybe
that's
it's a
clear.
stalled proposal. I mean, how many proposals do big companies have out there that aren't getting signed?
Yeah.
But they end up at the event, they come through, they answer a question that maybe there was a disconnect on. There's so much that happens at these events. There's so much granular detail that it's the reason why subjectively people are like, events are great. You know what I mean? That is a piece of the reason, because there's so much real good stuff that's happening.
Yep. Yeah. This is a proposal I have on my desk. It's an initiative I want to do, but for whatever reason, I'm not convinced. And then I see how well you pull this thing off. And I'm like, oh, you guys are good. It's the look, touch, feel. Now I believe it. I can move forward, right? Then there's customer resurgence. This is I forgot how much I love these folks, right? I'm already a client. I might be a low-level client, but I might be ready to like up my engagement with you, go the bigger package. They didn't realize you have new services, new different things, forgot how much they love you. And then there's finally the last two, which is
big partnerships, distribution.
Activating your partnership. When you go at things together, you know, webinars is one way, but like if you're doing something in person, again, it's an accelerator. And then channel management to me is like the whole like distribution thing. If you are somebody that sells through channels, to have your buyer, your channel partner, and the other person in the same room is super, super powerful. I love that, man. What has changed for the role of so that is events et al.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the event marketer, right? Our listener, what has changed in her world?
Well, there's her and him.
Sure.
There's a lot of hers.
We can do both.
I would say one of the biggest things is it's strategy and approach versus just execution, right? They're being asked to do stuff more, not asked, they have to do stuff more intentionally. They have to be more strategic. It's two pieces. Just executing almost becomes no longer enough anymore, right? It is, what is the thought behind this? Who is the audience? What is the experience? All the stuff we've been talking about. I think it's just so important and so meaningful in that space. I think that strategy, approach, intentionality goes into portfolio planning and tiering your events, right? Okay. Which ones get what budget, which ones get which approach. There's so much detail that goes in. I think that is the big thing for me that I see changing for event marketers or corporate event marketers.
Yeah. And this is why we start with like the event environment first, right? Because that sounds like that is expectations of them based on the ecosystem and how it's changed, right? If the company owner is wondering, man, I'm spending a lot on events, is it really worth it? That's going to channel down to the event marketer, and now everybody knows that they have multiple options. So you're going to have to be able to. You said it right, like you said this idea of you got to be able to get stakeholder buy-in is a skill set that you have to have. Tell me more about that.
So I think for very high level event marketers that are dealing with the executive level teams, right? They have to build a business case. That's what I'm hearing over and over. That's what the discussions are about, the questions that they're asking, the things that they need. Everything is about building a business case to go to executives and say, look, this is pushing forward our business objectives. This is pushing forward our goals. Here's how. Here's the metrics. Here's the qualitative and here's the quantitative data. You need both, right? So you're building a business case. And I think, man, overall, that is how you get buy-in. When you have buy-in, you get more room to work, and then you get everybody on your same page, which I think opens up events to really being dangerous.
That feels like the underrated skill set that has popped up on this show a couple of times now that people don't talk about, right? Like, there is the we're going to get to it, but I remember talking about the difference between an event organizer and a marketer, but the idea of like investing in the skill set of how you sell upstream
Yes.
seems like a major thing to talk about.
So I think so I think how you work laterally is really, really important. How do you work with sales? How do you work with marketing? How do you work with go to market? That's really, really important. You need to get them on your train, right? You need salespeople for pre-show marketing. They need to understand the event, the purpose, the intention, what you're trying to achieve, how it benefits them. That's laterally. You're working across departments, right? Because you're in events. Events is events.
Yep.
You get marketing, you get sales, go to market. It depends how big the organization is. The next piece is working up to the executives.
Yep.
Do you have their buy-in or not? Because if you don't have their buy-in, it will always be difficult. It'll always be questioned. It will always be listening to subjective opinions of someone's like, these trade shows, this event doesn't do anything. Oh, it's a big spend. Oh, we're spending too much. Oh, it's like, those are great things to say, but they are disgustingly subjective. Where is the information? Where is the data? Right. And when you can get that buy-in by showing them hard numbers or even soft numbers, even numbers, it's not like, hey, we spent $1 million on this event and it's going to produce $1 million this year. And then the lifetime value becomes 10 and every year. But you know what I mean? Like there's getting that buy-in. It's presenting a business case. If you're talking to executives, they want a business case. So you're working both ways. You're working up to present a business case and you're working horizontally to get the support that you need and make it a team effort. Because events is not just an event department. It's so many players inside of it.
I like that. I like that you clarified that for me because it's not, so it's stakeholder buy-in. Those are the people that you need to work alongside of. You have to be able to rally the troops to be able to execute all the things around the event that make what happens before and after the event successful.
Yes.
And then there is building a business case. That's the idea of, hey, person who cuts the check, I can show you why this is valuable to you and to the resources of our company. And you said something interesting to me that is kind of like, if you can do that, that's when you get to the reason why we all do this, which is ideas, experiences, creative. You want to say a little bit about that?
I just think that's when you get freed up. That's when you're not worried about just executing. When executives have that buy-in, smart executives end up pouring into it. You know what I mean? And they give you more resources. They give you the tools. They give you the freedoms to go and operate the way that you want. Now, I think you should be doing those things no matter what, right? I mean, but when you get that executive buy-in because you're built a business case for them, I think if you talk to 100 event marketers that are working for big corporate companies or even smaller corporate companies, the ones that have executive buy-in versus the ones that don't have executive buy-in, I think there's a big difference there. There's a delta in the way they feel, in the way they operate, in the freedoms in which they have.
Yeah, freedom. Freedom is such a big thing, right? Like this idea that you get to do the stuff that you want to do, not the stuff that you think
you get to take chances.
You get to take chances.
You get to take chances. And events and marketing is all about chances, doing stuff different, doing it outside the box, right?
Yep.
And you don't get that You get a lot of company, they do the same thing every year. They'll use the same booth. No, no, no. We just want to reuse it. Oh, no, no. We're going to do it this way. This worked. And you get stalled in this same pattern.
Yep.
Right. Because you can't take a chance because you don't have a business case. And that means it's a cost of doing business. You're just spending because you don't spend more. You don't even know if you should spend less. You don't know because you haven't built any kind of business case.
But by bringing it back to that idea of cost of doing business versus strategy, it's kind of saying how this all compounds together, right? Because if on one side you're saying you got to treat every event different, and in order to have success, you got to do this. But if you're not able to build a business case and they're just saying, well, let's just do it the way we've always done it, you're setting yourself up to success. So you're either in like a downward spiral because you can't build a business case, or you're building a business case and now you get to really tailor things and take chances and do the stuff.
I think that business case comes down to people. People know when they're talking to somebody that has a grip on something. So if you're talking to your CMO or you're talking to your CEO and you're running the event program, if you're talking about your event program in a tiered portfolio, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and you're saying, this is why this is tier 1, this is why this is tier 3, this is why this gets deployed $50,000, this is why this gets deployed $1 million. This is why the approach here is we're sending 6 people. We're running a dinner. We have a 10 by 10. Only 2 of them are in the booth in the 10 by 10. The other 4 are running meetings at the hotel offsite. Hey, in the tier 3, in the $1 million spend, this is the team that goes. The CEO is there. Like you're breaking it out to where it makes sense. Yeah. Because the answer that people come back to is, well, we've always done it this way. What executive wants to hear we've always done it this way. You know what I'm saying? So I think,
or employee wants to hear that.
You probably have executives vice versa, telling the event marketer, well, I've always done it this way.
Yeah.
Right. So as the event marketer, be the one to shake the tree, be the one to build the business case, be the one to say, this is why we're tiering these events. Tiering your events, I guess we're going to get into that, which is essentially saying it's forcing you to categorize your events, right? It's forcing you to place an order of importance, order of size, order of budget allocation. It's forcing you to think about your approach. Your approach should not be the same for each one. Do you have the audience? We were talking with a potential customer the other day, and by diving into some of this stuff, some of the discussions are simple. Inside the booth, they don't get the ICP executive decision maker person that they want, but they do get the engineers, the people that influence, the people that are asking the questions and tinkering. And so the booth experience can't be built for the executives. It can be a smaller exhibit. It can be a smaller setup, enough to field the questions, do raffles, do giveaways, build some relationships, but big bucks got to be spent on the executives because they're at that show. They just don't go to the show floor. So they're offsite. So they run a crazy bomb ass dinner. Top notch. X hundred a plate, the whole thing, because that's where the business is done there. So that's what I mean by approach. What if they just blew all their money on a big booth, but there's no executives walking in? So that's the things. Those are the levels of discussion that you have to be having in order to execute properly.
Let's go a little bit. Let's double click into that tier thing, right? Because I thought I understood tiering based on tiers are, I've got a gigantic trade show and I got to treat that differently than I treat the regional one, than I treat like our customer dinners that we do around the country. But you're saying that there's a level of tiering that it comes to each different event and how you categorize that. But there's also a level of tiering inside the event based on the client. Is that what you're saying?
No, not so much. I think tiering, my point on the executive and the engineer there is saying that when you do tier your events and you're putting them in categories, it forces you to dive into the event and say, what does this event get us? Why are we there? What is actually happening at this event? Do we need a 40 by 40 for $600,000? What do we need? Who is on the floor? Who are we speaking to? In that event, it just so happens that the executives are not on the show floor. So everything on the show floor has to be tailored to their more day-to-day contact versus the relationship, the sign off, the big dollar bit comes in at the dinner with the executives. They're the ones that are going to pull the trigger, but you still got to have some buy-in from these engineers.
I heard somebody say something really intelligent recently, that it's like, you got to be aware of who the person that cuts the decision maker is, who the user is, and
Yep.
who the
Yeah,
beneficiary
and that's
is.
similar. Yeah.
And if you can think of those tiers and think about how you approach that stuff per event, now you're cooking.
And
with
look,
grease.
if the executives were on the show floor, and we're just using this example, but if the executives were on the show floor, then you'd build that exhibit space differently. But they're not.
Yeah.
This company knows that they're not.
Okay.
So yeah.
So great question from Wendy Porter. Wendy, thanks for throwing that in there.
Thanks for the question, Wendy.
She says, so how do you get those executives to attend those dinners? We can't get access to lists ahead of time to invite those people. You usually just get a physical mailing address. I think this goes into something you're really passionate about, which is pre-show marketing, right? Like,
yeah. Okay. So Wendy, so you're saying that there are executives, and you can write in the chat as I talk this out. If there's anything that you have to clarify. So you have executives that you're trying to get to a dinner at a conference, but you don't always have all their contacts. So here's what I would say. True. I mean, data at these big conferences is a major struggle. It's a major feud from the association versus the exhibitors that are paying money to be there. The association doesn't want to give up the data because they think you're going to spam them, which probably most of us probably would, right? And then you need it. That's why you're going, because you're paying to be in front of these people. So it's a tug and pull. What I would say is this: your options are pretty simple. The one is year over year, as you go to this show, you have to collect your own data without question. You have to collect your own. If you're not collecting your own and building upon the relationships, the people you've met, the contacts you've made, then you're doing yourself a disservice. 2, I find that a lot of the apps for the events, there is really good contact resources in there. It's showing you who's attending, who's there, and you can pull a lot of information from there while you are at that event. So I would be pulling information from
at the event, and typically about a week prior, right? Like for us, Exhibitor Live,
prior, yep.
yeah,
It's a couple days prior.
They
for
released
events.
the app, and immediately the team went to work of just like, who's this person, who's this person, who's this person,
And it's
and
as
hitting them up.
people sign up. So you have people probably a week before that are opening this app, and then all the way down till a day or two or the day of the show, right? Your last minute. The next piece that I would say is using tools like LinkedIn Navigator, Zoom Info, Seamless AI, right? Which is, who are the companies? You should know the companies that you're trying to get the executives from. Who are the executives at the company? You can figure it out these days. You can definitely build a list. You build a short list, and then I would be crafting an email to an executive, which should be written a certain way, short, to the point, no BS, and I would send it at a obscure hour. I would not send it between 9 and 5. If I'm emailing an executive, I'm sending the email on a weekend, or I'm sending the email at 7:15 in the morning, or maybe 6:30 at night.
Interesting.
Because I think that that's when you're going to catch their attention. They all check emails, but they're working during the day, their meetings, they're busy and things like that. But I think those tools could be really helpful for getting them there. Outside of that, I'm probably working with your sales team. I'm talking to the sales team to make sure you have the right companies, the right targets, and then you can go hunt down and try to figure out who these executives are. And then, of course, last is, what is your offering to them? Are you putting something out there in front of them that they're going to want to go to? Because they'll probably be inviting to multiple dinners, right? So what makes your dinner better? Do you have a keynote speaker there? Are you doing something different, a learning? What would they want, right? I don't know the industry. I don't know who the executives are, but that's what I mean by diving into these audiences. Who are the executives in your industry? Is there any repetition with them? Is there anything that's similar so you can build your dinner around that?
It feels like for those dinners, I've seen two things that are either you have.
Oh, hold on. I just want to add one thing, Wendy. It's hard. It's not easy. Like what you just asked and what you're trying to do, so many people are trying to do. It's difficult, but I think going through the motions, trying all those things, keep trying, keep pushing.
She says, it is hard.
Yes, it is. It's hard. So I don't want to just stay here and be like, oh, do this. It's so easy. It's not. But I also think those are the motions that need to be made.
I would add lumpy mail. If you have a mailing address, I think that we overthink a lot of just like, how can I do a Facebook ad and do all these different things?
Yeah, maybe a gift with a thing.
If you send a real gift with a real thing, with a handwritten note of we're doing this thing. And again, it goes back to the offer, right? Like it goes back to like, are you coming to dinner to be pitched by a bunch of our salespeople? Or are you coming to a dinner to listen to this like thought leader? Or are you going to the dinner where you're going to facilitate a conversation between you and other executives like you to solve a problem that you all have? And maybe you can brainstorm.
What do the executives care about? Like the people that you're bringing to dinner, what do they care about?
Yeah.
And that,
Yeah. So
Good question, Wendy.
yeah, great question, Wendy.
Thank you
Appreciate
for
it. So that is the expectations on event marketers today. Let's talk about from the inside out. How have their expectations of themselves changed? What are you seeing there? Like,
Man, I've talked to a lot of them, right? I've talked to a lot of people, head of global events, people running the show. I've talked to a lot of people new, people that are being thrown in the fire. I think people new, thrown in the fire, learning, they want to learn. They want education. There's no book, there's no degree, there's no playbook when they get to a company on here's how you execute a 20 by 20 trade show booth at one of your conferences, right? So I think the younger, newer, thrown in the fire, they want education. They want to learn. They want to know how to be better at their job, right? That's their, you asked about like their
yeah,
expectations
that makes sense.
internally.
That
What are
makes
they
sense. Yeah,
thinking? And I think the more advanced, the more senior, the more experienced people, they want to know how to change shit up. They want to know how to do something. It's like every year you got to pull a rabbit out of the hat, right? I mean, every year you got to do your user conference different. You got to do your trade show booth different. You got to show up fresh. They want ideas. That's what I think. They want ideas.
Yeah.
They want ideas on how does this look different next year?
Yep.
And how is it better? That's what I would say.
That makes sense. I mean, listen, I think the social media now allows us to see the best version of everybody. So you're now comparing yourself against the best event marketers in the world
Yeah.
and or people that have really smart sounding insights that to you, like come across like, God, why can't I be doing that? Right. Like
Yeah.
I think of what's happening right now on LinkedIn. It seems like it's the golden age of shitting on events and trade shows.
There we go.
Right. Like there's
I know.
guys out there holding up a sign being like, look at me, I got all these impressions.
I didn't sponsor. I don't have an
Yeah.
exhibit, but I'm at this event and I'm making the most of it. Per se.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
understand.
Talk directly about that. Talk directly about like the Tim Davidson effect of like how cool. Like, listen, man, it looks cool, right? Like I
Yeah.
see that dude. I'm like, this guy's funny.
Yep.
He's cool.
Good
He's got-
content.
it's great content, right?
Yeah.
What would you say to an event marketer that's looking at that and be like, oh, my company's so stupid. Why am I doing
Yeah.
this?
So you kind of pointed out a Tim Davidson to me. So anybody that's on LinkedIn, you can look up Tim Davidson. He's a content creator. He works for a marketing company. Good marketer. He's funny.
Yeah.
He has good
Yeah,
content,
great.
but he does, as Pablo said, he does kind of bash on trade shows a little bit, but I don't really know if he's bashing on trade shows. I think he's asking questions that are reasonable. I think the younger generation is going to trade shows and they don't really know or really remember what it was like without, the phone in the hand and LinkedIn and Instagram and things. So the younger generation is questioning trade shows. Do we really have to spend $400,000, $150,000 on the trade show booth? All this planning, all this time, be there for 4 days. I think he's questioning it.
Okay.
Now, from his standpoint, yes, he's going to trade shows holding up a sign that says, I forget the ones, he's had multiple. My question to him is, that's a play to create content to then go get impressions. Are those impressions and people going and following his content? How much business has that created? Is that created? What is the lifetime value? Could potentially be a great move, great play. But I also think there is a ton of it that somebody like that doesn't understand, right? Because yes, there is some wastefulness in trade shows and the high cost and exhibiting and spending 3, 4, 5 days and all the time and energy. And I mean, we design, build, support people at trade shows. So, but I'm not afraid to say it. Like there is wastefulness there, right? But I think what it ties back to is there's also people that are crushing it. There's also people that they quadruple their spend plus the lifetime value. Like I've talked to people that just destroy their trade show, whether it's the large scale or whether it's a 10 by 10 booth, like they're doing 60% of their sales in 1 year sometimes. So there's two sides of the spectrum. I think where it gets down to me is what we've been talking about: intentionality, strategy, and approach. If you have those things, you're able to identify this is a waste of time.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be spending $300,000, 4 days, countless months of planning at this show. You shouldn't be. And that's okay to say, right? Change the approach, change the way you're doing it. Should you just host a dinner? Should you just go there and do like disruptive interviewing and street signs? And sure, maybe you should, but what is that going to produce you? Are you tracking and measuring that? So to me, I'm seeing it. There's a bit of a bravado right now and people saying we're not sponsoring, we're not exhibiting, but we're going to go to the third party event and we're going to leverage that everybody's in the city. But what you're doing is you're validating the fact that the value of a trade show and an event is everybody being in the one place for 3 or 4 days. You're still leveraging that.
Yeah.
So if without that event, you can't do what you're doing, you need to go create your own event, which is what a lot of people are doing. And that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, we're going to get into that story in a second. Wendy has another question on, which is kind of like this. She's saying, what is your perspective on smaller booths? I've got a client that's pulling back, used to be a 20 by 30, now going down to 10 by 10 pop-ups due to increasing costs. I think it's shooting themselves in the foot. Have you seen data on whether size matters?
That's a good question. So here's what I think, Wendy. I think, again, it comes back to the approach. So if they were doing a 10 by 30, right? Larger booths, I would be saying, hey, what's the spend? What's the return? Why are you pulling back? Because if it's just a subjective feeling, then I don't know how you spin them or how you change their mind, right? And yeah, I mean, when it comes to smaller booths, I mean, I've told this story plenty of times. We worked with somebody way back in the day. They wanted to buy a 30 by 30 $250,000 trade show booth to go to a trade show that they've never been to before with a very unique and kind of weird idea. I just stood my ground and said no. Passed up on the sale or to the bid on the sale because I said, you don't know the show. You don't know if this idea is going to work. You don't know if your ICP is there. You don't know any of this. They told me, go fly a kite. They went and bought the booth. They went to the show. They used it once. They owned a $250,000 trade show booth that probably cost them $20,000 plus a year to store. Never used it again.
Brutal.
Right? Called me back because I was the only one that said I wouldn't sell it to them and said, hey, not you were right, but they were like, didn't work. Okay. But we have this, they kind of got their mind thinking about, well, why didn't this show work? Who was the person there? And my point, Wendy, is they ended up going to smaller shows, more intimate shows to where they felt like they could get direct to an ICP, right? Like their actual client. And they did 10 by 20s a couple a year and they crushed it. I mean, they spent 30% of what they spent in that one show doing smaller booths and they did it. So I would say, yeah, I mean, small booths work, but what's the show? Is it a huge show where they're just going to get lost in the sea? Is it a smaller show? Are they going to run a dinner? Do they have targets at that show? Are they going to sponsor anything? And that's what I mean by the approach. The approach has to make sense. What I hear and what I probably with your client is we've always done this 10 by 30. We don't feel like it's giving us results anymore when they don't even know if it gives results or not. So they're going to cut back. Then they're going to cut back. But if they don't know if they're getting results, then what does the cutback do? It just saves them money, which tells me that they're treating it like a cost of doing business, just something that they have to do.
Yeah. And Wendy, Wendy followed up with saying they did it strictly due to cost. She says, yes, that is exactly right. Yep. So I think, Wendy, if there's anything to take from that story is the idea that if you believe that this is a mistake and the 20, 30 by 30 booth is what they should be doing, and this 10 by 10 is a mistake, chances are they're going to come back and be like, you know what, you are a trusted advisor. And what are your thoughts on other things? Or is the moral of the story
you
that
kind of have to, can you open up that question? Is your contact the person that can answer that, or are they just taking marching orders? Because that's very different. And then it is what it is, right? You can't help everybody. They are going to reduce their spend. You should just help them with their reduced spend and go on. But I would say, hey, no problem. I'll help you with these 10 by 10s. But hey, I'm just curious, like, is there any other part of your approach that you're going to change? Yeah. Do you think there's the right client at this show? Is it that you don't have the clients? Is that there's not traffic? Is it that they're not there for what you're providing? Like there's a reason that they believe that that 10 by 30 or 20 by 30 isn't working. It's not just spend, right? Because if they were spending $80,000 between the booth and you and everything else, $100,000, but they were crushing it, cost wouldn't be an issue. But for some reason, they think they're not crushing it or they know they're not crushing it. And to me, that's kind of the conversation.
I like that. That's deep. It's not that they don't think the spend is worth it, is that they don't know that the spend is worth it. All right, cool. Ilani Moya is asking, Pablo, what was your event planning tier that you mentioned earlier? Ilani, I can't remember. I'm trying to keep up with Matt over here, but I promise you that my team will cut out that piece and send it to you. I'm making a note right now to send this over to you. Bill Lando says, Bill Lando's a Gen X. right? And he's saying questioning is good. As millennials move into leadership positions and Gen Y enters the workforce, you've got a whole different experience of a digital first perspective.
Yeah.
I've noticed that only team that the millennials and Gen Y that exhibit don't hold the same cachet. So basically saying that they just value it differently and it doesn't hold the same cachet. It's in line with what you're saying, right? It's how do you marry that gap, right? Like, how do you, at the end of the day, the magic sauce is that everybody's gathered together. There's something special there. We can all harvest that special. And depending on the intent, depending on the client that's there, you harvest it in different ways, right?
I said this to you when we were having a conversation. A lot of the questioning that I am seeing is coming from younger companies and specifically tech companies. They tend to be younger. They tend to hire younger. The CEOs are younger. Everybody's younger.
Yep.
But that's just their world, right? That's not manufacturing. That's not chemicals. That's not food. There's some industries and businesses that are just older. They're just older in general for good. I mean, for good reason. They utilize these trade shows. They have relationship. They've had success. So I think it's great questioning trade shows and events, but I think you should be questioning your spend, your approach, who the customer is there. Are you going about it the right way? Because yeah, a conference and an association is getting a group of people together for 3 or 4 days. Who is that group of people to you? And is the group of people that you need to be there? Then how do you get in front of them the right way, in a meaningful way? Is it a big booth? Is it a dinner? Is it an offsite activation? Is it sponsoring something? Is it keynoting? Is it a combination of all of it? My point to everybody is that is for you to decide. You have to be the one to decide that. No one's going to give you a magic pill and say, oh, this is it. This is what you got to do. You have to figure that out for yourself. So people just kind of crapping on the traditional trade show, I'm okay with that and okay with questioning, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's deeper than that. So I would urge people, don't fall into that trap. Fall into the trap of understanding your client. People are going to events. They're going to keep going to events. They want to be met in person. They want meaningful experiences, especially the younger generation.
Yeah.
They want festivalization. So you want to talk about an idea? I think these B2B conferences need to festivalize themselves a little bit.
What does that mean, man? I've heard you say that before.
I don't know. I just think if you look at all the events that are having a lot of success, it's not just,
Yeah.
I mean, look at Dreamforce, look at South by Southwest. I mean, look at South by Southwest. It is absolutely the best example. You know what I mean? So, you know, are B2B conferences going to maintain where there's like 70 keynotes and it rolls from one to the next? And they, you know, it's like they have a lot of the same vibe, a lot of the same energy, a lot of the same setup.
Yeah.
Well, how can they break that up? How can they make it more meaningful? What about more fireside chats? What about more peer-to-peer groups? Are you hosting do you have a big event where you have a lot of like what I would call like old heads, like a lot of people that have been in the industry a long time? Well, can you set up something where they mentor younger people and give them a relationship? Can you get younger people, future leaders? Can you get people new to the industry set up together to converse? How do you make the interaction and make things more meaningful? Then, of course, do you have dinners? Do you have concerts? Do you have things of that nature? Because I can tell you, rolling to an event and just listening to a bunch of keynotes and going from hall to hall to hall, man, that gets old at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's definitely not, festivalization is not bringing Hootie and the Blowfish as the musical act, right?
I do like Hootie and the Blowfish.
I bet you do. But it sounds like, you know, the world has become more ADD, change it up some, right? I can't help but think of, we haven't talked about this, right? But my buddy Raj, who is a one-person company, pulled off this like Chicago Hype Week event. And it wasn't one place. It was much more like South by Southwest. It made me think about it. He had Techo Tuesday, which was like a taco night for tech companies. Then he had Venture Hoops, where they ran a pickup basketball game, you know, for this thing. Then he had, you know, we produced this like musical album. He had like the album release party. That was like the
You're talking about congregating people better.
Yeah, doing different things that isn't just top down listening to one person and more like activities, you know, mastermind type stuff and engaging different senses. Last thing, man, as we are up on time, even though we started a little bit late because of technical issues. What are you doing different next year when it comes to events? How has your learnings from the stuff that you did in 2023 going to impact what you're doing in 2024?
Well, I think for us, I mean, you mean like for me, for Rockway, from our company, it's just getting more in tune with our customer.
Yeah.
Really, what do they need? What are they thinking? What are trends I see happening that we can fulfill for them, be a resource to them, right? How can we meet them I mean, I know what those things are now, or I feel like I have a good grasp on them.
Yeah.
So we're definitely going to be making some changes,
Yeah.
talking to our customers. Hey, is this something that you need? Hey, is this something we can help you with? For sure, you know, but I would say events are strong. They're going to stay strong.
Yeah.
I think they are going to change though. There's going to be changes. There will be changes that happen to them. You're seeing some already. You're seeing people do stuff differently, get creative and have success. It's only a matter of time before that creativity becomes a parody. But are you late to that? Right? You have to be on time for that.
Yeah.
So people like, you know, I talk about Debbie Kemp when she did her mobile tour.
Yeah.
Well, everyone's like, yeah, let's do a mobile tour. Okay. Well, is a mobile tour right for you? You can't just say, oh, let's do that because it's cool. Debbie with Canon Medical, she did a mobile tour because it makes sense, right? They're selling into hospitals. They want to get in front of doctors, nurses, people at these hospitals. These people are busy.
Yeah.
Travel's difficult for them. They work long, hard hour shifts. So what do?
A ton of them work in one building. Right.
She creates a mobile tour with everything they need to see in it. They do some lunches. They drive this thing around the hospitals. They park it outside. They send them invites and they say, hey, come out at your convenience. That's smart, but it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
So I think you need to understand what those are. You saw the one the other day. The CEO said he invested so much money into a trade show and is a total bust. I would ask that CEO, the question is, why did you spend $750,000 in trade shows? Had you been spending this and making a return? Or did you just decide one day just to spend all this money? Because he's complaining that they didn't get any results on the 750,000, which is fine. And maybe trade shows didn't work. So what did they do? They went a different route. They rented a mansion in LA and they threw a wellness get together and it was a huge hit and success. So great idea, works for them. Well done. But I would go back. Were you exhibiting prior that 4 years and getting a return on that 750K? Or do you not know if you're getting a return? Or did you just one day wake up and say, hey, I want to deploy $1 million at trade shows and it didn't work? Because I would say that's stupid.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
man, I would say, Matt, if there's anything that I feel like has been a through concept here, is that you were talking to us about falling away, like moving away from falling in love with our solution, our idea of what should be, and instead fall in love with the customer and fall in love with the problem. Because that's the way that you're gonna like shuck and jive and figure out your event strategy, essentially.
I think so. I mean, I think it's a matter of what does your customer want? Where are they? How can you meet them? I've said these things over and over again, and they are at the conferences. They do want to go to them. They are attending, but why are they attending? How can you change their experience? What can you do with them differently to engage them? It's just all these questions to be asking yourself, because at the end of the day, face-to-face event marketing is about meaningfully engaging your audience face-to-face. How are you going to do that? Because if you're doing it the same way all the time or the way that we did it 20 years ago, are you really meaningfully engaging them? People complain about, oh, you know, the trade shows, I'm there and, you know, it's hard days on the floor, all this stuff. Well, you don't have to do it that way. You can do it differently.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's kind of what I'm saying is I think that that's where it needs to go. Those are the discussions that need to happen internally.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Speaking of meaningful engagements, those of you that showed up, Ilani, thank you, sending great regards. Bill, sending great words. Wendy, great questions.
Yeah.
Those of you that showed up, I think that this has been your portal for engagement, and this feedback that we get when people show up and ask these questions, I think are so extraordinarily valuable to you.
We still have people?
We still got 15 people. We had like
awesome.
30 before.
It's awesome.
So, you know, thank you all for taking an hour of your day to be there.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Matt, any kind of like final words on like end of 2023 going into 2024?
Yeah, I would say my final thoughts are events are a very subjective industry. There are a lot of people trying to put objective data behind events. You're going to see it. It's pushing, it's moving in the right direction. People like CEIR, right? People like Joe Fetterbush, Evolio Marketing, Chloe, and, you know, over at
these are all past guests of
yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm trying to run through everybody. You know, they're putting data to this so you have objective information. And what I would say about events is you need qualitative and quantitative information, right? There's a feel that you have at events. There's information that you can't get from data that happens at events. And then you need that quantitative information to make the right decisions moving forward. There's so many options to meaningfully engage people face to face. But if you're not trying to track that stuff, if you're not trying to understand what's happening, understand your customer, understand the experience, then you won't know where to go when it goes wrong. You're just going to subjectively assume that it may be wrong. Hey, we have to pull back spend. Why would we pull back spend? This is earning X and plus lifetime value. Why would you pull back spend? You wouldn't. So I think that's where the industry's been for such a long time. There are people trying to solve that problem. And I think more people need to try to be on that train, having those discussions, and moving the needle forward, because events, they've lasted this long because they do something right. And I think I kind of tried to explain that in Pipeline Impact, what events do. It's now a matter of how do we quantify it to the best of our ability based on what you do, who you are, and all of the variables that make your business. Not everything's going to look the same. Not everybody can have the same scorecard. Not everybody can have the same ROI measurement. It's all going to be different, but you got to know what events are doing positively. So then you can then find a way to gain an understanding of where you are winning and where you are losing.
Well said, my friend.
Cool.
Like I've always said, this is my favorite podcast. So thank you for doing this, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for hosting.
Yeah. Wish
Thanks
you all
everybody showed up.
Merry
Christmas.
Holidays.
Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas. See you
Awesome.
in 2024.
We will see you in 2024. We have some really cool shows coming up. So another panel show we're working on. Yep. More panel shows. Can't wait. And thank you everybody who watches, follows. Awesome. Really enjoy it.
All right, we're out.